if I asked you, do you need to change? And you said to me, no, I'd be worried. You know, like, you think you've figured everything out, like emotionally, professionally, all your relationships, everything's golden? Oh, okay, how's that working out for you? You know? I think the answer is always yes, which is to view ourselves or our organizations as works in progress. You know, that is an infinite mindset. Infinite mindset is fundamentally constant improvement. So, you know, there's big change, there's little change, there's tweaks, there's dramatic change. Sometimes it's reacting to changing cultures, changes in culture, politics, technology. You know, sometimes the change is our own, sometimes we have to react to it. But I think the honest answer is yes, we have to change. There's always opportunity to improve something.
I think this profession is going, you have the great advantage that there are other professions that have gone through this before you, and you can see what they've done in right and wrong. And you can see other industries as well, how they've screwed it up. So for example, and it's because they waited for the change to happen, as opposed to grabbing the bull by the horns, right?
It's just one S, no big deal.
Right, and
so there's this notion in businesses that people fear change, which is just fundamentally not true. People fear sudden change, you know? But incremental change is not threatening. People fear change that threatens them, right? And very often the way we change manage is we do lots of PowerPoint presentations about what's coming and don't worry, and we have all these things, and we treat it very rationally, and what we're ignoring is the emotional response. Now, there are some people who love change. It's an infinite-minded thing to embrace uncertainty, to see opportunity in surprise. For some people, especially people who have gotten good at doing something for 10 years, 20 years, that all of a sudden you say you're going to change it, they fear, again, there's that emotional word, they fear that they won't know how to, or it will set them back. And so no number of rational assurances will help them get over that. At some point, we have to just let them go through the process.
Netflix invented Netflix and not the movie and television industry. It's because the movie and television industry were protecting their old business model and literally ignorant of the fact that the world was changing around them. You know, Netflix had this new subscription model, and it was a small company. Blockbuster, which was the 800-pound gorilla, like, you remember when we used to get DVDs in the mail? So like, they knew streaming was coming, they just didn't, it just wasn't there yet. And so the CEO of Blockbuster went to the board and said, I think we should explore subscription, because this little thing called Netflix is onto something that's gonna happen when the technology gets better. And the board wouldn't let him change the business model to subscription because they made 12% of their revenues from late fees. And look what happened. Blockbuster does not exist, except for one store in northern Canada. And Netflix is the dominant force in television and movies. Why is it that a computer company invented iTunes and not the music industry? It's because they saw the change coming, and the music industry was still trying to protect selling albums in stores, because they saw their customer as Tower Records and HMV, whereas iTunes, Apple, saw the customer as the person who actually buys and listens to the music. Why is it that Amazon invented Amazon and the e-reader, and publishing industry did not even invent the Kindle? Like, it's because they're too busy protecting the old business model. So I think if you go down this route of protectionism, of protecting what we have and staving off change, you are signing your own death warrant. And if it's not your death warrant, your business is going to become way more difficult, and another firm or another that may be completely outside your profession. Remember, iTunes, Netflix, all of these were companies completely outside their own industry. In other words, they couldn't even figure out which one of you it's going to be, because it won't be any of you. It might be a software company that'll completely eviscerate your profession. And so I think to be the one that says, okay, it won't be the way it was. We can't defend the way it was, and we're going to have to imagine, what if we were to invent our industry now, knowing nothing, what would we do? And again, this goes back to the question of why. Well, why did you get into the industry in the first place? Did you get into this profession because your parents told you to and you can make a good living? You're not going to be the innovator. You know? Did you get in this industry because you love math? You know? You're not going to be the innovator. Did you get into this industry and do you love this industry when you really get to help people re-understand and reimagine how to build an organization? Because when you can understand the language of mathematics, when you can understand the language of a balance sheet, as clearly as you can understand the language of cultural change, it's kind of like that, right? It's the rational and the emotional. And we said it before, which is the numbers are only half a picture of the health of the business. And if you got in this industry to be of service to human beings who are trying to do bigger things for themselves, for their families, for society, through their customers, you might be onto something. So the question is, what value do you offer to the people who buy your product? Now, how would you do that in this new changing day and age? And literally ignore whatever was, because it's irrelevant, because it may or may not survive. The industry, the profession will do fine if you're the ones willing to blow up your own business. But if you're going to protect your business, it'll get blown up for you.
It really boils down to empathy. You know, there's this phrase that's thrown around so often that people fear change. No, they don't. People fear sudden change.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, you know, many of the people in your organization, you know, many of them have been doing the job the way they've always been doing it for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And now we're going to say, okay, it's going to be all different. The fear is not from the change. The fear is from the unfamiliarity. The fear is that I know how to do that really, really well. And I fear that I don't know how to do that. And I will feel insecure. I'll be off my game. I'll lose my credibility. And you just have to put yourself in their shoes. The fear is being humiliated. You know, I don't understand the jargon. It's all new. You know, it's a whole host of things. So empathy is king. Empathy is king, and not assuming that everybody knows. And people come along with new directions at different paces. We kind of assume it's like getting into shape. You know, everybody goes to the gym, but some people get into shape quicker than others. There's no rule. It's just how it works. And it's the same here. Some people come along lickety-split, and some people are just a little slower. The ones that are potentially destructive are the ones that are so afraid that they actually put up barriers and become obstreperous. They actually resist the change to the point where they're clinging onto the past so desperately that they may accidentally sabotage themselves. And those are the ones that we have to have difficult conversations with. We sit down and say, I need to have a difficult conversation with you. I get a sense that you're struggling because everything we're trying to do, all you do is say no. And I understand it's difficult, but we got to talk about this because the company is going in this direction and I want you to be a part of this, but I am patient. And to have that conversation privately with empathy, that someone can come clean and say, I'm scared, because then you can hold their hand, you know? So I think empathy is actually the core to helping people manage change.
The law of diffusion is a theory that was proposed in the 50s or 60s by Emmett Rogers. And basically all populations shift across the standard deviation, the old bell curve. If you have high performers, you have low performers, you know, et cetera, stuff like that. And what the law of diffusion tells us is that the first 2.5% of your population are your innovators. This is your big idea people. Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, right? Then you have 13.5% of your population that are your early adopters. These are the people who are willing to pay a premium, suffer an inconvenience, extend extra energy to be a part of something that reflects their own beliefs. Stand in line to see Star Wars a week before it comes out, even though you can just wait 2 or 3 weeks and buy a ticket and go in. For them, it's worth it, right? And then you have your early and late majority, who are more cynical, more practical. What's in it for me? What guarantee am I going to have? What happens if it goes wrong? Will I get my money back? Like that kind of stuff, you know?
You ever seen the YouTube video of the guy dancing solo and then the early adopters come and then next everyone's coming? And that's a movement, right?
That's a great example of how it works. Now amplify that to an organization. The innovator is the person who came up with the idea, the person who first started dancing. And other people said, you're an idiot, right? But a small group said, yeah, but it's fun. You know, we'll give it a try. And then before you know it, it's a perfect example of how law of diffusions work and how tipping points work. When we try to affect change inside an organization, we obviously want to affect the bell. We want to affect the majority of the company. But that's not how change happens. Because the majority will not try something until someone has tried it first. They're risk intolerant. And so what you actually want to do is aim for the early adopters. You aim for the people who go, all right, it's not perfect, give it a try. And if you can get about 15 to 18% market penetration, it just tips. Again, because someone else has tried it. It's happened. And so the way you affect change in an organization is not to thrust it upon everybody, because you're going to get massive resistance from the majority, but rather identify the pockets of early adopters, individuals and teams, that are willing to try this new thing that you want to try, get the kinks out, and then before you know it, what ends up happening is the majority starts getting angry, like, why weren't we given this? Well, that's called demand. We love that. So it's about building demand and creating that tipping point. That's a more effective way to create sticky change.